Welcome to Inside Games, the only gaming news show brave enough to play Crimson Desert and tell you all of the things it had wrong with it from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's kind of a review, kind of a, I don't know, an existential discussion on the meaning of video games. Crimson Desert is such a fascinating video game in the ways that it's not fascinating at all. It's such a contradiction, and I think playing it, appraising it, and certainly people's reactions to it really do bite off a lot of kind of fundamental topics about what are games for, what makes games fun, and things like that. So I think we're going to probably review the game a little more traditionally to start off, talk about what it does right, does wrong, what we liked about it. And then, I don't know, there's some grander thinkables centered around Crimson Desert that kind of come from playing games for decades and decades. This game has really surfaced, and I'm really excited to have those conversations. So I guess buckle up. Hopefully you're playing Crimson Desert with this on the side, and we can give you some deep thoughts while you're, I don't know, harvesting 80 iron ore.
I also want to say, by the way, I really like this video game. I've liked it since the very beginning. I've just said there's lots of little issues along the way, and the more you play it, the more you discover those too. That said, I'm still having way more fun playing it than I am being frustrated with it.
Yeah, I'd say I'm in the same spot. I think I have a high tolerance for games that are particular, and this game can be awful particular. I think there's also something very comfortable about it. It is the most video game in ways both positive and negative. In the ways that games can be kind of like puerile and silly and a waste of time and just a list of tasks. Why would you want to just do busy work if you're looking for entertainment? But it also somehow, through that, manages to create a sense of wonder and discovery and excitement and joy. But all of that is in this container that has basically no soul. It's got no creative thesis, no raison d'etre to tell you why you should play it, apart from just being a jumble of activities. But isn't that what play is? You know, play isn't. When you were a kid, you didn't necessarily need your game of checkers to teach you how to feel. And maybe that happened along the way, but I don't know. And I'm already kind of getting into the headspace around it, so I'm gonna yank it back. Crimson Desert. You play as Cliff, a very gruff, taciturn knight errant who goes around the world doing all sorts of bullshit for all sorts of people. And every one of those bullshits leads to its own bespoke weird mini game where you have to discover unique controls for this one puzzle or do this one thing in this one way, which itself is very video game, or at least very classic video game. I felt very nostalgic playing this game, thinking about a bunch of games from the 80s and 90s that didn't have the capacity to explain themselves and were also sort of designed by 5 different people over the course of 6 months. So it is this jumble of different solutions to the same problem, no kind of unifying philosophy between different aspects of the game. And you see that here in spades. So it's nostalgic, and I wonder how much of my enjoyment in it is based in the fact that I've already been conditioned to like and enjoy games like this. I don't know. Do you have similar feelings, Bruce? How do you feel about this game?
That's well put, Lawrence, because I was just going to summarize what you said. There's no story. It's like there's like the lightest sense of what you're doing and why, but it's the tropiest thing in the world, is what I said when I did the preview. And I immediately don't care about it. And that doesn't bother me. Both Lawrence and I think are generally gameplay first people. It's great when a video game has story, and it's really fun to discover the story along the way when the gameplay is good. And that's usually what I do with these sorts of games. Skyrim is a great example. The story in Skyrim is, it's kind of non-existent. And the only reason people know what it is because they played 300 hours of it. And then eventually they discover it accidentally. And it's the same with Crimson Desert. It's hilarious streaming this game because people come in and be like, oh, that's Naira, or that's Cliff, or that's Jan. And I'm always like, what? I'm like, how long have you played this game? And they're like, oh, 300 hours. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the reason you know these characters' names. Like, if you've played this game for 10 hours, you have no idea who anybody is or why they're doing anything. And that's okay. I actually don't. That doesn't bother me at all. So for me, this has always been a gameplay first game that you accidentally discover the lore along the way.
Yes, I think you can look at Crimson Desert and immediately identify it as any number of games. I think that's part of why it is the ultimate video game, is because it's just a mishmash of all those things. But I think you're starting to hit on some of the aspects that make it different and not as good as a lot of the games that it's immediately compared or visually compared to. Something like The Witcher 3, especially in context of story. Not even the overarching story, which is still pretty good, but even the individual quest lines and things like that. Witcher 3, almost to the point of being a little predictable in this way, would always have some kind of profound twist over the course of a quest line. You'd be set up with certain expectations or assumptions, and then the writing would sort of swerve it under you. And I mean, you want to talk about having unified philosophy, that's kind of the world of The Witcher. It's all these inversions of folklore and things like that. Ways that, fairy tales can become a little more dark or a little more believable, a little more human. And then, yeah, you don't get any of that in Crimson Desert. It is a stack of the most rote boilerplate MMO style missions. But the volume of the stack is what's impressive. You look in any direction and there's just, you could just walk in a straight line and run into tons of video game activities. And that's impressive in itself, even if those activities aren't necessarily meaningful or have a container of an interesting story that plants ideas in your head. You mentioned gameplay first. That is the story, which I think tends to be a little stronger for players. They don't necessarily, I've noticed that people tend to resonate with stories where their experience is the story, that sort of Souls thing, where the story is, I almost died, went through this dank cavern, found a key, climbed this tower, rang a bell. Over the course of time, your adjacency to the plot starts to form a structure in your head, and told through whispers of characters that are fading out of reality, and poor Zanzibar falling off that bridge. But it's weird because Crimson Desert still has that. You still have that experiential story of you choosing what to do, and then you can see in the game your decisions leading to an experience that you get to play through. So it's bizarre because it exists it's got one foot in the hot water and one in the cold at the same time. And again, makes it feel like a classic game in that way. The thing is, when you follow any of those lines and you find those activities, suddenly you run aground into the specific requirements of that one activity, because it's vastly different than anything you've done before, even though it seems like you're doing the same thing, and that's where the controls get really whack. Or the gameplay, what the game asks you to do or how it asks you to do it. Was that your experience, Bruce? You just hit these like solid road bumps every so often?
That's right. It's just walls that you slam into because you're like, you're having a great time running around. You picked up a goat. You force punched like a rabbit off the cliff. You like sliced up a bunch of bandits and you're having a great time. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, a puzzle. You walk up and find a puzzle. And then you're like, I wonder how easily it is to solve it. It looks like 5 columns. It should be simple. No. They are not simple. They're terrible. These puzzles are horrible. You have to Google them immediately. A lot of them don't have reset switches on the puzzles. So if you accidentally move the column or whatever, piece in the wrong spot, you can't do it. You have to reload your save. Or some people were like, you could fast travel. I was like, oh, right. That's so easy to do. Go do a fast travel and then come back. Like it's insane. And it's funny that we were talking about the story when it comes to the gameplay and the context of the gameplay, because you're like, well, Bruce and Lawrence, if there's no story, the gameplay must be perfect, right? No, it's like nowhere near perfect. The controls are terrible for the most part. The double jump is my best example of this. I purchased double jump as one of the skills. I was like, ooh, double jump. I was like, double jump would be great. So you hit spacebar to jump, at least on mouse and keyboard. And then ideally, right, jump, and then at the height of your jump, you do another double jump, right? That's a double jump. No. Double jump, there's timing to it. Meaning the double jump is like a bounce. It's like a launch. So you have to jump and then on the way down before he touches the ground, press it again. So the double jump gives you an extra 3 feet of height, maybe? I don't really even know. It's terrible. And this is just one example of like the horrible controls and the just confounding gameplay when it comes to only specific aspects. It's funny, whenever I talk about Crimson Desert, it sounds like I hate this game. I think to myself, people are listening to Bruce and they're like, this dude hates this game. I love it. I'm having a blast. But these stupid things that jump in your way, you just have to get past them. That's literally it. Like when I was like, all right, well, I'll never use double jump ever again. And like, I will occasionally accidentally double jump and be like, whoa, I'm okay, sure. And it's the same with puzzles now. If I run into a puzzle, I'm streaming it or I'm Googling it. There's absolutely no way I'm doing this puzzle. Like I'm gonna attempt it like a Zelda puzzle, like go up and be like, oh, I wonder, like the shrines were like so cool. You knew because those game designers were wizards that if you accidentally did something, the puzzle would reset, and you'd be like, and it would know what to do. It would tell you how to play it. This does not do that. You have to Google it. So all of those things aside, the actual exploration of the game is beautiful and so much fun, and I love interacting with the crazy side characters that are always complaining about losing their sheep or some other bullshit that you don't care about, but it's funny to watch them whine and wail and hurt each other and all that other stuff. So there's a lot of charm in that, but no charm in the figuring out how to use skills or do those puzzles.
It's interesting that you describe that process as having no charm, because I was going to bring this up. This is one of the meta topics of Crimson Desert. I think some people, I'm trying to think of where to start with this. So playing Crimson Desert feels like playing a game in the 80s. To some degree, it feels like kind of playing a PS2 game where the designers or designer made an arbitrary choice about how a particular puzzle ought to be solved or something like that. But that was really before the science of communicating a lot of those things to the player had really been set. And I think comparisons to Zelda really strike that home, and also drive home the ways that other games have done what Crimson Desert tries to do so much better, whereas Crimson Desert just does them all. So in the intro of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I actually replayed the intro going into Crimson Desert. There's parts where they're teaching you how to build stuff, and just around, in places they know you'll look, they have versions of the built thing already. So they'll show you a constructed raft just sitting on the ground. And then 2 rooms later, there's a situation that would be solved with a raft, and all the bits of the raft are strewn around. So they plant the idea in your head, and then they show you the ingredients later, trusting that your brain will make the connection and you'll feel like a genius for coming up with this on your own. Crimson Desert does maybe the opposite. They don't even properly cue things. In fact, often they mistakenly cue you the wrong way or give you the wrong idea about what you ought to do. All right, now comes the question. Is it okay for that to be an enjoyable part of the flow of a game? Is the sort of combative relationship between you and the game design where you understand that each new mechanic you come across is going to be some new arbitrary decision from some disconnected developer that just decided to put this puzzle in. And part of the meta is understanding what weird logic went into the creation of this. That can also connect with playing online. I don't think it's a very satisfying experience to, Google the solution to a puzzle and just put it right in. But when you're talking about streaming, that's so much cooler when you can compare notes with people or try to solve a puzzle with people who maybe haven't solved it yet, so they don't just tell you the answer. I find that experience really exciting, and that even feels like playing Dark Souls for the first time. I remember I found serious fault with Dark Souls as being the kind of game that your average player would not probably feasibly beat on their own, that it sort of required online help. And to some degree I remember at that time, a lot of players were saying, no, it's okay to design a game that way. It's okay to assume that the internet's going to be there because it always will be, and it always, like it has been. We're in the age of the internet now. It's okay to make games like this. I think Crimson Desert has some of the same energy. Is it excusable? Can you assume that the internet's there for the playthrough of Crimson Desert and excuse its poor prompting of the player as taking on a new experience of its own?
That's a great question. And it's something that I have thought a lot about, because I think what you're describing with the streaming, because Lawrence and I were streaming the game and then having our chat be like, oh, I solved this, here's how to do it. I think that's a very unique experience. I don't know that a lot of people get to experience that, so we're very lucky. Most people are going to play Crimson Desert and go, what the fuck? And Google it. Or ideally, maybe they have a friend sitting there, and then you and the friend talk about it and be like, oh, well, you could do this thing or you could try that. But that implies that both you and the friend know what the game is and how things work in the game. I don't know that exists for a lot of people. I really don't. Again, in a community setting where it's a shared knowledge thing, it's awesome. I love it. It's so much fun to stream this game. If I was sitting there with a second window open on Google, being like, okay, all right, I gotta Google this fucking puzzle. What's the name of it? Like, I don't want to. That doesn't sound like fun at all. And in reality, that's actually exactly the opposite way of a. I'll play a video game. It's funny because people would say this about Blueprints. Blueprints is a great video game, but people are always like, well, you got to get a notepad. You got to write shit down. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking? It's a video game. Why do I have to write shit down for a video game? That's what the video game is for. Like, it saves those things. Like, if it had a notepad in the game, great. All right, cool. I'll type notes and I can look at it. But like, there's no way. Now, I know, by the way, this is unique to me. I know there are a lot of other people that will do that. They will write stuff on a notepad for Blueprints, and they'd love to go Googling for puzzles and stuff like that. But let's be fair here. For those puzzles, you didn't solve them. You did not solve those puzzles. Google did. And if you went and Googled them, you really did not interact with the video game at all. If you sat there and fought through for 45 minutes and solved the puzzle on your own without any help, okay, all right, yeah, you did it. But if you Googled, you didn't do it.
Or are you saying, Bruce, then that there's puzzles in Crimson Desert that you didn't solve?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Does that rob your satisfaction of the game, or do you still feel good flying through and getting your cubes and stuff?
No, I don't feel good. No, I don't feel good doing it.
Oh, okay.
If I have to Google something, it does not feel good. I'm like, what am I doing? I might as well just go, like, I'll just like, it doesn't make any sense to do that because I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm letting Google play the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on how people want to interact with it. Because yeah, for the most part, I try my hardest to not look things up in Crimson Desert. And
me too. Yeah.
But the thing is, at the end of it, I have to wonder. That's only good if something positive comes out of it, aside from wasted time. So there were a couple of instances, I think, where I would arrive at a quest objective, but the way to access it would not be obvious. Like, it's like, get in this building, but you can't. Like, there's no door. So what they intend for you to do, I guess, is explore around and find a cave. And then go in the cave and see that it actually connects through and you can crawl up into the building that way. That's what in that circumstance is probably the best, that specific circumstance, probably the best example. Because I explored around the area. I found like an ore vein. I mined some iron. I took in the scenery a little bit. And I guess it was a cool beat to kind of discover that on my own. But it also took like 25 minutes. And I don't know that that was necessarily well paid off. Or specifically if there's like a puzzle that I can't even figure out how to interact with. If it's like, if you have to use 20 minutes just to figure out that, oh, you needed to hold that button longer, just because it didn't give you any feedback whenever you first tapped a button or something like that, you had to press and hold and the game just didn't tell you that. A lot of that stuff reminds me of the frustration of playing older games where I lost an hour or whatever doing nothing just because I didn't know this one assumption that a developer made about what I would do or what I would understand walking into this room. So I really go both ways on this. I'd like to believe in the romanticism of it, that an obscure, mysterious game where even the mechanics are a bit of a puzzle can become a new kind of experience. But I guess you really have to judge it on its hit rate of whether or not that's true. And I would say with this, gosh, it's maybe like 30 to 50% of the time spent fiddling around with something that ought to work right away but doesn't. I don't know, like, does it lead to a new thing or does it not? I'm not sure. I still don't know how to tell if anyone's cheating at Duo, and I hate that fucking game. I don't know. That's a thing you just have to Google. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. So I'd like to believe in the communal shared experience. I think sometimes we've even had some of those where we'll check in, like, where are you at? What's the last story mission you did? Do you know how to do this yet? No, is kind of where it goes. But those discussions are fun to have. And they don't happen too much around more linear games. You know, it's just like, with a linear game, it's just like, oh yeah, that was cool. I like this part. Oh, me too. But there's not really that much trading of info because there's not that much freedom of expression that can happen in those games. So yeah, Desert's super weird because it's got that freedom, but boy, does it cut both ways.
Well, yeah, so you're like, let's really split hairs on these puzzles because you're right. Like, I think I know what you're describing, or like this door you can't get into, so you have to figure out a way to get through it. For me, I like jumped over the mountain. I just did like I flew over it. I did a couple spirit jumps and then flew over it, found a door and walked right in. So I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. I don't mind this. Like, this doesn't bother me because like there's a way to get around it or whatever. There's a couple of different ways to do it. That to me feels like there's game design intention somebody was like, okay, well, there's a door here, but there's like 3 different ways to get through it. The player could do whatever they want. Like, it was really funny. I was streaming it the other day, and somebody's like, oh boy, here comes a really difficult puzzle. You're gonna have to learn this shitty mechanic. I just jumped over it. I jumped over the gate. Like, I just jumped over it. And they're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. I like that. That's really, really cool. But there are actual puzzles that are designed one specific way. And if you don't do it that one specific way, it's fucked. And you have to start over. So there, in my opinion, there's no intention there. If they had put a reset button, that would fix the entire thing, but they didn't do that. Yeah, so splitting hairs there with the puzzles is interesting, because there's like some ways it's cool that they were like, yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but then other ones are not like that. So in my opinion, it smacks very much of the way this game was made, which is, everybody talks about the fact that it was just a mishmash of who knows what. Like, it's like somebody stopped here, somebody they picked up the story and then they overhauled the story for another year, and then like it's just like a bunch of people picked up this game and then left. You know, like, that's what it seems like. It was, there wasn't one person heading up the design of Crimson Desert for 10 years. They were there for a year and moved on to another company or something.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it touches on one of the other more philosophical ponderances I guess I have about Crimson Desert, which is that this is a game that doesn't really have any thesis aside from video game stuff is cool. And it is. And that's basically what this game is it sort of has picked the gameplay mechanics and content from a lot of the best games of the last 15 years and tried to throw them all into one game together with no unifying thought other than all these games are awesome. So they are. How do you feel about playing a game that doesn't necessarily have any meaning of its own apart from just doing video game stuff is fun? Is that enough for you, or do you find yourself yearning for more?
No. The answer is no. I never find myself yearning for more. If the game is fun, I play it. I don't know that, again, like, my philosophy coming from the 80s and 90s, like Lawrence has been talking about, these old games, that's the way they were. Like, you played them for 15 hours, and it was just a little man jumping on platforms. Like, you didn't have any meaning to them. You had to go and, like, ask your friends or read a magazine about what the game was actually about. But if you had fun playing the game, well, at least you had fun. And if you never looked into the meaning of it, it didn't matter. You still had fun. That's what Crimson Desert is to me. But since we are now into the modern gaming era, there are a lot of single-player video games that have to have a single-player story that is, like, somewhat believable. There's a meaning to it, or, you know, maybe just a through line. Like Stellar Blade is a great example. I don't remember what the fuck happened in Stellar Blade at all. Stellar Blade I think there a spaceship crashed or whatever, and like that, like, who cares? Like, it didn't matter, you know. Like, but the game was fun, and I'm sure that if you played Stellar Blade for 500 hours, you know what the story is. But if you played it for 10, it didn't matter. Like, and my best example was always Destiny. Destiny and Destiny 2 are the most video game ever, because I logged in when I first started playing Destiny. I was like, oh, neat. There's like a story you could play through, and there's strikes. And then they start telling you to do the strikes 3 times. And I was like, what? What narrative influences the fact that I have to do this 3 times? Nothing. It's a video game. And there is nothing in Destiny 2 that tells you, well, you got to do the strike 3 times because we have to kill this guy 3 times because he's in a multiverse or whatever. Like, no, none of that. Just do it 3 times. And it's the same with Crimson Desert. It's like, go here, do this. Go here, do this. Go here, do this. That's it. That's all it is. And I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me because the game is fun.
I think that's part of people's strong reactions to this game, if they have strong reactions, is the implication that games ought to at least try. I think, like, when you bring up Stellar Blade, it tried, you know. I'm not going to say if it succeeded or it failed. But yeah, it was trying to have a story. It was trying to have, you know, ideas. It was trying to have themes. I think a lot of people either implicitly or explicitly think that games of that type, games that are just fun, games that it's just a video game content on a disc, that's maybe outdated, or that games have evolved have progressed. I'm gonna guess that based on your answer, Bruce, you wouldn't agree with the idea that games are supposed to have meaning, or even that games that have a unified meaning or a unified thesis are superior. I think maybe people, myself included, go through maybe an art house phase where you have played a lot of games that are just kind of like sugary and video game content, and then you play a game that does have maybe a more unified creative idea, maybe even that the game mechanics are intertwined with the narrative somehow, and all this forms like a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. But then to have something like Crimson Desert where it's just a lot of parts, but there's so many parts that's what's amazing about it. It really does kind of, for me at least, it reminded me that conviction is not necessarily always accurate. It's okay for games to just be fun if what people want is just fun. I think it's tempting to think that anyone that's playing a game just for fun, or that's just experiencing surface level gaming content, that they just have yet to be exposed to the right kind of game to have their gaming chakras awoken. But I don't know. Now I think I might be on the far side of the pretension hump, where suddenly I realize that movies can just be popcorn, and if they're well made, then that's enough, or it can be enough if it's done well enough. And then I guess the real question is Crimson Desert done well enough? That I think will come down to actually the temperament of the player, whether or not they're willing to Google, I guess, when they get stuck, or how much Googling feels like it removes the process of playing the game, how much it actually works contrary to the game's fun.
Man, this is such a great talking point, what you're talking about here, comparing video games to movies and television. Because with a video game, we learned early on, you and I, because we're older gamers, that gameplay was always first. So playing a game was fun, and then if there was a narrative, we got lucky. And then as time has gone on, now there is a narrative to motivate the gameplay, or vice versa. The gameplay motivates the narrative. So yes, I do think that the art of video games is evolving. That said, the thing that you described earlier about how a video game makes its own story, like we can describe to each other what we did in Skyrim, what we did in Crimson Desert, that does not exist with television and movies. It doesn't. There are ways to watch television or movies and then come away with a lesson that you learn, and you can talk about those lessons, but you don't really have a story of the thing you did in a television show or a movie. So it's interesting when people try and compare a video game story to a movie story or a television story, because generally the narrative is the thrust of what you're watching in a television show or a movie, usually. And if it's fun, and there's a narrative, who cares, right? It's like a Fast and Furious. You can watch it, you had fun, you walked away from it, and you went, well, that was fun. And it allowed you to forget about your life for a couple hours, cool, great. But if you watch something like Andor, you think about Andor once a week, like I do. You think about all the parallels to real life and like the amazing acting and production, it's all of it. Like it's like one of the best shows ever made. Those are the things that really resonate with people. So there are lots of different forms of art when it comes to television and movies, and it's the same with video games. But the interesting thing about video games is that if I play a video game that has no story, like Skyrim, I mean, there's a story, obviously, but very little, I can still think back to Skyrim and be like, man, I had so much fun doing this. I had so much fun doing this. I had so much fun doing this. I don't think about that with a Fast and Furious. I don't think about that with The Acolyte on Disney Plus. Like, to me, it's like occasionally I'll think about, oh, The Acolyte had those really badass lightsaber fights, but that's it. With Skyrim, I really can actually think this was like a defining moment in open world games. Same with Metal Gear Solid 5. Like, to me, like those gameplay elements are just like unbelievable. There's like something I'll never forget. So if Crimson Desert is like that for you, if you play Crimson Desert and you're like, holy shit, you can do all of these crazy things, it might become that game for you. It might become the game where you like play 500 hours of it, and then we talk about it for years and years, sort of like Cyberpunk did. Even without the narrative in Crimson Desert, I don't think that same thing applies to television and movies. I really don't. I think if you watch a show on television and movies that's just for fun, okay, well, you forgot about your life for an hour. And then that's basically it. Like, I'm not going to look back on Monarch, the monster show on Apple TV, and be like, whoa, wow, there's so many, who gives a shit? Like, I had fun watching Kurt Russell. Like, that was it. But Crimson Desert, since it's a video game, there might be more staying power there.
There might be. I think certainly there's a way to interact with it on a little more profound level, or for people to have, their unique experiences. It's funny when you compare it to TV and movies, because I realized what I do with that kind of media is sort of relegated into two buckets. There's the stuff I'm going to pay attention to because it deserves the attention, things like The Pit. And then there's things that are just nice to have on in the background because I'm so familiar with what they are, I don't necessarily need to pay attention, nor do I even suspect that the thing that's on was produced with a keen mind for its, artistic whole. The director was also just making an episode, earning a paycheck. And that kind of feels like what Crimson Desert is to maybe some of these other games. Whereas I think when I'm referring to other games, I'm mostly referring to the games or the acolyte of video games, where it thought it had some kind of creative whole, or it tried to convince you that it had a creative whole, but maybe had one or two cool parts about it. But then there's other shows, there's like people that just watch The Office on loop, which have very meaningful episodes, of course, but I mean more in the way that they consume them. They're very familiar with it. It's comfort food. So it's on in the background while they're doing something else. That's kind of how I think about Crimson Desert. And I guess my connected point was, there are so many games that, whether or not they do, try to convince you that there is some sort of creative whole to it, some sort of deep spirit that's worth understanding and learning. I actually found it weirdly liberating to give myself permission to not give a shit. Like, I don't have to pay attention to a single cutscene. If I look over and there's like a mo-capped fight happening, great. Words, whatever, man. And it's actually kind of nice because out of respect to, I think, the intent of the creators with most games, I try to at least pay attention. And this is something that I've even tried to talk myself out of playing MMOs in the past. I remember playing Star Wars: The Old Republic and really trying to read every conversation and listen to everything and track all the stories. And I was not enriched by that because I don't think the developers necessarily were putting their heart and soul into every last fetch quest. And that's the case here. So it has been kind of nice to play this game in a relegated status, where it's like, I can play this while watching something else because this doesn't need 100% of my brain. It barely needs 30, unless there's some random mechanic that it's trying to get me to do that I just can't for the life of me figure out. So did you feel anything similar where it's like, oh, praise God, the game doesn't even think that I have to pay attention to this. So everyone's having fun now.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing I didn't even realize that those were my thought processes, because that's what I do. I am, by the way, generally speaking, when I do things, I consume them with my full attention given to them. It doesn't matter how bad they are. So any television show, I sit down to watch The Acolyte. Like, I'm not put The Acolyte on and then use my phone. I don't ever do that. I always watch the television show because I'm like, I'm going to give this television show my 45 minutes. If whatever gives me, I don't care. I'll judge it on its merits. But I don't ever then, if I pick up my phone while I'm watching a television show, I just turn the show off because I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense. With Crimson Desert, it's the same way. I give it my undivided attention unless I'm streaming. That's the best part about streaming Crimson Desert, is I can just look to chat and we can fucking bullshit about whatever while Naira goes on and on, or Jan goes on. Who cares? Like, right? Like, none of that matters. I'm sitting there holding down the space bar to fast forward through the cutscene because it doesn't matter. I love that. And it's one of my favorite things to do with these open world video games, is not only play them and just sort of get lost, play for a couple hours, again, forget about your life, just enjoy what this is, but also stream them, which is, again, a unique experience to us. And there are so few video games for me that actually have a narrative that resonates. I'm trying to think of, there might be a couple. There were a couple spots in Metal Gear Solid 5 where eventually, even though that narrative's pretty crazy, there were some spots I was like, whoa, this has some intention to it. I'm trying to think of it, like even Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, barely, kind of, right? Sort of. I don't know. I didn't finish Expedition 33. But I've heard that that's one that really has a story that resonates. Cyberpunk, I played a lot of Cyberpunk and actually really enjoyed that narrative. There are lots of really interesting side quests that have fantastic little narratives inside that game. But just generally speaking, when I play video games, I'm not looking for a narrative. So Crimson Desert is perfect for me that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think some people, I think there are a lot of people, again, whether explicitly or implicitly, assume that intertwining narrative with gameplay is the future of video games, or it's how video games ought to progress. Certainly that was the feeling in like 2006, 2008, or even 2011. It's so fitting that you were bringing up Skyrim comparisons, because I've had a lot of those feelings too. It's kind of an Elder Scrolls game, and it's an Elder Scrolls game in the way that Elder Scrolls 6 probably won't even be, looking at the trajectory of Bethesda. Elder Scrolls used to mean trying to cram loads of mini games and tech and interconnected systems into this vast open world, and then giving you, the player, the opportunity to just go and have your own adventures. Kind of like MSim Light. And I think those are the things that people really, responded to about it. It's a shame to see, well, I won't get into it too much, but Starfield doesn't necessarily give a lot of hope that they're going to be able to keep up that spirit of overstuffing games with systems and mechanics and then letting the player loose in a playground. But this game very much did and does. So I almost wish that everyone that is getting excited about Elder Scrolls 6 would just play this. Just play this. This is your Elder Scrolls 6. Please think of it like that. And then don't take the heat off Bethesda, because I'm not sure that they're going to be able to satisfy those expectations or even make a game this big and outrageous years from now. But it is interesting, again, to think back to Skyrim times, because this game, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, this game would have been considered the ultimate game if it came out in 2011. And you could say that about a lot of games, but I think it checks all the boxes for what would be considered the perfect video game up until maybe like 2022, 2023. When suddenly an overproduction of games and individual games hitting such ridiculous amounts of content, now we're all well fed, and we don't necessarily need the all-you-can-eat buffet of video game content that Crimson Desert really is. So I guess I wanted to bring that up because right now, in this exact moment, Crimson Desert is sort of the opposite, I think, of what people who play a lot of games are looking for. And in some ways, it even philosophically represents what people might be afraid of the future of games becoming, which is loads and loads of content that's all regurgitated from other sources without any kind of unifying soul of its own. I think you look at, Google AI and the games that it can make, and I was like, oh, it looks fucking exactly like GTA. How amazing. I can't wait to play a game that looks and feels exactly like GTA. Nobody's really excited for that. And I think when people look at Crimson Desert, that's maybe what they see, and maybe what the reaction coming from within is that this is what maybe the best case scenario of what you could imagine of an AI engine just scraping Witcher 3 and Skyrim and GTA and just smushing it all together. And here's what you get. For some people, I think that's, again, the perfect game. And for other people that I think demand or expect more, it's borderline insulting that this product should be put in front of somebody and purported to be entertainment art. I think a lot of the similar dynamics happen in film and TV, which is why I kind of bring those up. But yeah, it's just fascinating to reflect on how a game doesn't release in a vacuum, And I think the conversation around this game would have happened so much differently even if it were half the size, if it were a quarter of the size, and it came out 15 years ago. Interesting to think about how it would have gone over then.
Yeah, the AI point is so scary and pertinent, because that when I played this for the preview a couple of weeks ago, before the game was out, I was like, there has to be AI involved with this development. Like it's so huge. I was like, there is no way that a person touched every single pixel of this map. Like I was like, it's just too big, and hopefully I'm wrong about that. I want to be wrong that this was made by a team of 300 people over the course of 10 years. I love that, and I love those games. I love Fallout 3 because every little section of that map was touched by somebody. Somebody went in there and like made this little fun little side quest with, again, the skeleton sitting next to a honey jar or whatever, like it's like they made that. And Crimson Desert, I got worried because of AI. I was like, oh gosh, man, I really hope that they don't come out and be like, yep, 20% of this game was made by generative AI. And I'm like, fuck, like that's not what I want. I don't think that is the case. Obviously, they found the pictures, right, that were generative AI. But it doesn't feel like the game was made by AI in the sense like full side quests were made by AI or like discovering of different waypoints. I could be wrong. Could be wrong about that. But we are on the precipice of something like that, Lawrence, and it's going to start to look really, really bad and gross and mediocre.
Yeah, I doubt that AI was too instrumental in the building of this game because generative AI has only really been remotely useful in the last year or two. And yeah, that's just not enough time. They would have had to make all this content over the course of the last 10 years or so. But yeah, I do think Crimson Desert is maybe a vision of what we'll be seeing over the next 10 years, which is AAA games that just have an explosion of content. But maybe that content doesn't have the spark of humanity in it. Is that good or bad? I mean, the market will decide, right? We can wave our hands at that. And I think in there, I can see a future where it's kind of a self-correcting problem. In the way that Crimson Desert hasn't already sold 10 million copies, I think people are already a little exhausted with overstuffed games. So if generative AI has the potential to just explode the amount of stuff in a game, I think that's already not become a selling feature. So then how will generative AI even benefit the development process? I'm not sure. Or we'll just get games with exponentially more and more content, and only a handful of sickos will ever have enough time to actually play all of that. But no meaning will be found in that play anyway, because it'll just be another quest, just another find me 5 bear pelts. So I think it'll course correct. I think it's funny you bring up Expedition 33 because I think the reason that game surfaced in this time was because it was so heartfelt and so human. And I think people really resonated with that. And I think there's reason to hope for the future in that even with increasingly mechanized tools, people still need humanity in their games. But I would love for there to still be room for a game like this too. I think it's essentially the greatest hits of all video games. And I love video games, so there's no downside here. And I do hope that doesn't get lost somewhere along the way. It hasn't yet. The golden oldies of video games still work. Going into dungeons, beating up skeletons, leveling up, getting a better sword. You just can't beat it. It's been in games for 30 years, and hopefully it'll still be around. And that's really all this game represents. And man, if I had this game when I was 12 years old, I'd be a different person now.
You could play forever. You really can. There's like gotta be 250, 300 hours of content easily. Where you'll never do something twice. Like it's pretty wild how much there is in Crimson Desert. Also, I feel terrible. We did not talk about the graphics of this game.
Yeah, that was going to be the last thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah, because it truly,
the one thing you can't say a single bad thing about, really.
That's right. You cannot say, generally speaking, you cannot say anything bad about the optimization of this game. I have like a rock solid 60, 1080p. I feel like it's almost never dropped frames. There are loading screens here and there if you're fast traveling or whatever, loading into a save. But generally speaking, it really is, number one, super optimized, and number two, beautiful. It's a beautiful video game. There's lots of actual, in my opinion, artistic intention in the design of the map. Because like everywhere you look, like there's like snow-capped mountains and there's like a beautiful desert, and like sometimes if you go up into the sky city and look down on the entire map, you're just like awed at how unbelievably huge and beautiful it really all is. So that's where I found my human artistic intention, was in the actual graphics and look of the game.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I don't think I'm a dork for the artistry of video game technology. I think part of that is maybe the arc of time that I got to see video games, mature over, from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, just such incredible leaps of technology would power these profoundly new experiences. And we don't really get those wow moments anymore. Least of all with proprietary technology. So yeah, Pearl Abyss made their own engine for this game and shipped this massive open world game that manages to outdo Unreal or really any engine we've seen. It is a technological marvel, the kinds of which we just don't see in gaming anymore because it's so expensive to make your own engine. Cyberpunk was kind of the last big budget proprietary. I guess no. Resident Evil Requiem runs on Capcom's proprietary engine, but I'm very nostalgic for the battle of tech and sort of that being the platform on which the art exists. So there's kind of two layers to it. You have to make the tools to allow the artist to express their art, and then it's a merging of the two. It's the freedoms and also the restrictions implied by the technological layer of a video game that kind of influences the lens through which the art flows. So to that point, it's also rare to have a game that is so enhanced by its technological layer. You kind of brought up being worried that humans probably didn't touch every square inch of the landscape or whatever. I don't necessarily that doesn't bother me, because when I'm walking through a river, there's like a glade with sun coming through the treetops, and there's a river babbling, and the water looks really pretty, and there's petals floating in the air, and there's wildlife running around in front of me. That's a moment. That's a video game moment, and I got to that moment by choosing to go in this direction, and I'm experiencing this moment because I chose to slow down and kind of take everything in. And it's definitely the first game in a long time that has that visual punch. That's something that I was actually missing from Skyrim. To take it back to that, I thought that game looked pretty ugly when it first shipped. I remember throwing on loads of mods like everyone else did on the PC version of Skyrim to try to get it to look like a game that would inspire that same sense of awe. I think Bethesda did a lot of good work kind of reworking how that game looks for the Anniversary Edition. But yeah, Crimson Desert is there. It's beyond there right at launch, to the point where I'm excited to continue playing the game just to see what the new areas look like. There's the titular Crimson Desert. I can see it in the horizon. I can see it on the map. I'm excited for the story to eventually drag me up there, because I can't wait to see what frozen mountains look like close up. I can't wait to see what the desert looks like. And it's been a very long time since any game has had that feeling.
Lawrence, well said, because that is exactly right. Like, I just walking through, it's funny, I'm almost kind of tired of seeing the forest and the rivers and all that. Like, I want to go see another area, because there are so many other areas of this game, and they're all gorgeous. They really are. Like it's just really, really beautiful. The sound design is also adding to that as well. That's another thing we should mention. We should shout out, because it's that to me is where the artistic intention is in Crimson Desert. Actually, one last question for you, Lawrence. Do you think this game is worth the full retail price of $70?
Unquestioningly, if you value a game on its content, and that's, I guess maybe it's a bit of a cop out to conditionalize it, but it's 100% on what you value in a game, and in that way, it's pretty easy to wrap in what we've been talking about this whole time. If you want games to aspire to be more, you should stay away from this game, because it's just a bunch of tasks. But if you want a game that you could play over the course of an entire year, maybe chip in an hour or two a night, acknowledge that you're gonna have to Google some stuff, but if you measure a game on the amount of game you get out of it, there's no easier recommendation to make aside from something like Grand Theft Auto 5. But this is even bigger than that game in terms of the raw amount of game in it. So yeah, very easy game to recommend, even if, $70, $100 in some territories, without question. If it looks like the kind of game you could have fun with, you should buy it, because I don't think you'll feel like you got cheated out of video game at any moment.
I completely agree with you, Lawrence. Thank you very much for watching our little podcast about Crimson Desert. Sort of our review in progress. Obviously, I'm only like 25 hours in. I think Lawrence is only 20 hours in or something like that. We both only scratched the surface of this game, and I see a lot on Reddit about this game, and the post is 80 hours in and still not out of Hernand. That's the thing that people keep saying. 60 hours in, still not out of Hernand. It's absolutely true. You have to keep going back to Hernan. I'm like, just get me out of the city. I don't want to be here anymore. Let's go check something else out. But you just are having too much fun exploring all the different things that one city has to offer when there's so much else. So it really genuinely is. The way we've talked about this game sounds like we hate it, but I promise you I really love it.
Yes, it's rare to have such an interesting relationship with a game that seems so uncomplicated. You know, it's just a pile of quests, but what a pile! And boy, is it pretty. So yeah, leads to some complicated feelings, which leads to a lot of good discussion. So thank you for talking through those issues, Bruce. I love hearing your perspective on this because you're not nearly as conflicted, I think, about a lot of creative aspects, whereas I love dwelling on that stuff.
No, I'm not. I just like enjoying games. So thank you, Lawrence, and thank you for watching.